For more than 70 years, one currency has quietly sat at the center of the global economy. It determines how countries trade with each other. It influences the price of oil, food, and technology. And it gives one nation enormous influence over the entire financial system. That currency is the US dollar. But something unusual has been happening recently. The dollar has lost around 9% of its value. And around the world, governments are beginning to rethink how much power a single currency should have over global trade. From new oil deals conducted outside the dollar to alternative payment systems that bypass traditional Western banks, the foundations of the global financial system may be slowly shifting. And while this change is happening quietly, the consequences could reshape the global economy for decades. Because when the currency that powers international trade begins to lose influence, it doesn't just affect governments or banks. It affects energy prices, supply chains, inflation, and even the cost of living for ordinary people around the world. To understand why this shift matters, we need to start with a simple question. How did the dollar become so powerful in the first place? At the end of World War II, the global economy was in ruins. Europe's industrial centers had been devastated. Many national currencies had collapsed. And the world needed a stable financial system to rebuild international trade. At that moment in history, the United States held a unique position. Its economy had expanded dramatically during the war, its factories were intact, and it controlled the majority of the world's gold reserves. This allowed the United States to anchor a new global financial system around the dollar. Under the Bretton Woods system, many countries agreed to tie their currencies to the US dollar, while the dollar itself was backed by gold. This arrangement turned the dollar into the backbone of international finance. Even after the gold system ended in the early 1970s, the dollar remained dominant. Why? Because by then, global trade had already been built around it. Oil, the most important commodity in the modern economy, was priced in dollars. International loans were issued in dollars. And central banks across the world held massive dollar reserves to stabilize their own economies. Today, decades later, the dollar still dominates global finance. Roughly 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars, and a majority of international trade transactions still pass through the American financial system. This dominance gives the United States something incredibly powerful. Not just economic influence, but financial leverage over the entire global economy. Because so much global trade flows through the dollar, the United States holds a unique position within the financial system. Major international banks process dollar transactions through American institutions. Global payment networks are heavily influenced by Western financial infrastructure. And this means that when the United States imposes financial restrictions on a country, those restrictions can have enormous consequences. Over the past 2 decades, economic sanctions have become one of Washington's most powerful geopolitical tools. Instead of deploying military force, governments can restrict access to global banking networks. Countries targeted by sanctions may suddenly find themselves unable to conduct international transactions, access foreign reserves, or participate in normal trade. For policymakers in Washington, this strategy offers a powerful way to influence global politics without firing a single shot. But for many other nations, it also raises an important concern. If access to the global financial system depends on political relationships with the United States, then relying entirely on the dollar could carry long-term risks. And that realization has slowly started to change how some countries approach global trade. Another factor contributing to uncertainty about the dollar's long-term future is the rapid growth of U.S. government debt. Over the past several decades, federal borrowing has expanded dramatically. Today, the United States owes more than $34 trillion, making it the largest national debt in the world. For many years, this did not worry global investors. The United States remained the largest economy, its financial markets were deep and liquid, and U.S. government bonds were considered one of the safest assets available. But as debt levels rise and interest payments grow larger, economists have begun debating how sustainable this system will be over the long term. Higher debt means higher borrowing costs. Higher borrowing costs mean more government spending just to service that debt. And while the United States still enjoys enormous economic advantages, the scale of its borrowing is becoming harder for some observers to ignore. This does not mean the dollar is collapsing, but it does mean that confidence in the system must continually be maintained. Because the strength of any currency ultimately depends on trust. As geopolitical tensions rise and economic uncertainty grows, several countries have begun exploring ways to reduce their reliance on the dollar. Some governments are experimenting with new payment systems designed to process international transactions outside traditional Western banking networks. Others are negotiating trade agreements that allow them to settle transactions directly in their own national currencies. These changes may appear small at first, but taken together, they represent the early stages of a broader trend, a gradual attempt by some countries to diversify how global trade is conducted. If more nations begin adopting alternative payment arrangements, the global financial system could slowly become more fragmented. Instead of one dominant currency controlling most international trade, multiple financial systems might emerge. And that would mark a major shift in how the world economy operates. Perhaps the most important element in this discussion involves the global energy market. For decades, oil transactions have been priced primarily in US dollars. This arrangement is sometimes called the petrodollar system because every country that needs oil must first acquire dollars to pay for it. This constant demand helps reinforce the dollar's dominance in global trade. But in recent years, a few energy producers have begun experimenting with selling oil in other currencies. Some deals have been conducted in regional currencies, while others involve direct barter or currency swaps between trading partners. These experiments remain limited for now, but they illustrate a broader point. If energy markets eventually diversify away from the dollar, one of the currency's most powerful advantages could gradually weaken. Despite these developments, it is important to avoid exaggerating the situation. The dollar remains deeply embedded in the global financial system. Replacing the world's primary reserve currency is extraordinarily difficult. Financial markets rely on trust, liquidity, and decades of established infrastructure. No other currency currently offers the same combination of stability, scale, and global acceptance. But history also shows that economic leadership can change over time. Before the dollar, the British pound dominated global finance for more than a century. Eventually, the balance of power shifted, and the international financial system evolved with it. The same could happen again, though likely over many years, not overnight. The global economy may be entering a period of gradual transformation, one where multiple currencies compete for influence, where international trade becomes less centralized around a single financial system, and where economic alliances play a larger role in shaping global markets. For businesses, investors, and governments, these shifts could create both opportunities and risks. Energy prices may fluctuate as trade patterns evolve. Financial markets may adapt to new payment networks, and countries may seek greater economic independence from traditional financial structures. But the most important takeaway is this: the dollar still dominates the global economy today. However, the conversation about its future has already begun. And in the world of international finance, even small shifts can eventually reshape the balance of power. Because when the currency at the center of global trade begins to face new competition, the entire economic landscape can change.